Hello, my name is Borhan, currently a migrant worker in Saudi Arabia. Though I moved there in 2014 for a job, I initially had very few acquaintances. However, through work, I soon met a man named Hassan, who became not only my roommate, but also a close friend. Hassan grew up in a border area village, and I'll try to recount this story just as he told me. On the evening of September 29, 2007, mournful cries of 3 male voices echoed from the cremation grounds by the riverbank, drawing a large crowd. As people pushed through the gathering, they saw 3 sorrowful, familiar faces staring at a blazing, round object on a funeral pyre. One of them hurriedly poured water over the burning object, wrapped it in his shirt, and ran off to an unknown destination. What was in that burning round object that caused such grief? To understand that, you'll have to wait a bit. When I die, don't bury me, burn my body in the cremation ground, someone once said. Have you ever heard a Muslim child say such a forbidden thing? Probably not. But do you know why I told you this? Let me explain. My grandfather, Muhammad Abdul Karim, was a deeply religious and kind man, blessed with wealth by the grace of Allah. He had 2 wives. His second marriage was approved by the first, done to support the helpless. From the first wife, he had 3 children, my mother and my 2 uncles, Muhammad Abdul Qadir and Muhammad Rafiq. Qadir uncle was the eldest, my mother was the youngest. From the second wife, he had a son and a daughter. Although my grandfather provided separate homes for both families, everyone lived peacefully and harmoniously. He spent most of his time at the first wife's house, my grandmother's. Back then, our sub-district had a significant Hindu population. My grandfather gained his wealth primarily through business with them and owned a lot of land near the market. Around 2005, when he was about 60 years old, he began distributing his wealth. He gave each wife a house, gave cash to all children, and transferred all the market area land to the children of his first wife. Even after dividing the assets, both families had more than enough wealth, enough to last generations. Everything was going well after that. Then one day, a disagreement suddenly arose between my grandfather and the children of his second wife over some unknown issue, leading to a serious falling out. My grandfather never clearly told us what caused the conflict. From that day on, he never returned to that house, and they too cut off all contact with him and with us. Eventually, we learned they had sold their old house and property and were living in a rented home somewhere else. Around 2 years passed, and we gradually forgot about the whole matter. Meanwhile, my younger uncle Rafiq moved to London for education and work, and my elder uncle Qadir started a construction supply business with my grandfather, selling items like rods and cement in the local market area. Everything was going smoothly. Although the region had a large Hindu population, the government had built a mosque there, where my grandfather regularly tried to perform all 5 daily prayers. One evening during Maghrib, he handed over the shop to his workers and went to the mosque. My uncle Qadir was out on an errand, but returned shortly after Maghrib. When he didn't see my grandfather at the shop, he asked the workers, who said he'd gone to the mosque and might be late since there was a religious gathering, Milad, that day. Uncle said he wasn't feeling well and would head home, asking the workers to close the shop after Isha and escort my grandfather back. However, as Isha passed and night fell, my grandfather didn't return. Uncle grew worried and waited. Suddenly, 2 fishermen came running and shouting toward their house. When Uncle asked what was going on, they said, "Qadir, your father's in a terrible condition. Some villagers are carrying him to the doctor's clinic. You must hurry." Hearing this, everyone at home was shocked. How could a healthy man suddenly fall so ill? They rushed to the doctor's chamber, only to be horrified at the sight. My grandfather's entire body was covered in blood, as if someone had brutally beaten him with a stick or some heavy object in a fit of rage. He was in such pain that he couldn't even speak. After some initial treatment from the doctor, he was brought home. He remained bedridden for days, slowly recovering. When he seemed better, Uncle Kader asked him what had really happened that night, and who had done that to him. What my grandfather said next would naturally send chills down anyone's spine. He explained that after finishing the Maghrib prayer and leading the religious gathering, Milad, he was walking back to the shop. As he passed the mosque and began walking along the road toward the market, there were several Hindu houses to his right and a Kali temple nearby. As he approached the temple, a sudden shiver ran through his body. Regaining composure, he looked ahead and saw a tall figure standing in the darkness. At first, he thought it was someone familiar who had stopped upon seeing him. But when he asked the figure to identify itself, he was suddenly shoved with great force. The impact threw him back 3 or 4 steps. Then the shadowy figure began to transform into an even darker, more ominous shape and advanced toward him. It stepped on his chest and began brutally striking him with its hands, face, and possibly other parts of its body. Writhing in pain and fear, my grandfather began to lose consciousness. At that moment, he felt a mysterious force awaken within him, and he cried out, "Allah, protect me." That was the last thing he remembered. When he regained consciousness, he was in the doctor's chamber in the market. He later learned that the Hindu household residents and 2 fishermen had heard his cries and rescued him. Without their help, that dark entity might have killed him that very night. Everyone at home was left speechless after hearing this. The household staff had also heard the story, and soon, it spread across the village. People, regardless of faith, began visiting to check on my grandfather, as he was deeply loved and respected by all, both Hindus and Muslims. As days passed, he gradually recovered. But before long, another strange event occurred. One night, Uncle Kader got up to go to the washroom and heard the sound of heavy footsteps in the courtyard. When he opened the door and looked outside, no one was there. Assuming it was just a cat or dog, he went back inside. But later, the sounds became louder and more distinct. This time, it felt like someone was running all around the house. It didn't make sense. Tall walls with barbed wire surrounded the home, making it impossible for any normal person to enter, and even a thief wouldn't make such loud noises. Uncle opened the door again and saw nothing. He didn't tell anyone that night, but over the following nights, the strange noises continued. Although several people, including my grandmother and elder aunt, were living in the house, only my uncle noticed the strange occurrences. After a few days, my grandfather fully recovered and resumed working at the shop. One evening, while returning home after closing the shop, he passed 2 cremation grounds, one deep in the forest, the other by the river. That day, as he saw a cremation taking place by the riverbank, he suddenly said, "When I die, don't bury me. Burn my body right here in this cremation ground." Uncle Kader was shocked to hear this. As a devout Muslim, how could someone say such a thing? Uncle, stunned and disturbed, silently repented and gently asked my grandfather why he said that. After a moment of silence, he simply repeated, "Just do what I said. Bring me here and burn me." Without arguing, Uncle fearfully brought him home. Later, he shared the incident with my grandmother, but she didn't pay much attention to it. However, the very next morning, my grandfather fell ill again. Despite taking medication from local doctors, there was no improvement. He was admitted to a medical center for further treatment, but that didn't help either. He began to wither away, eating less and struggling even to walk. As his condition worsened, Uncle Kader contacted his younger brother Rafiq in London, urging him to return. Rafiq managed to come back within 2 weeks. But by then, my grandfather had deteriorated further. Even when taken to Dhaka Medical College, the doctors couldn't diagnose any specific illness. In just 2 months, his health had declined to such an extent that it looked as though he had been suffering untreated from a serious illness for years. Eventually, the doctors lost hope and said it was due to old age and age-related complications. They advised the family to take him home and care for him, and to try fulfilling his last wishes. After returning home, my grandfather kept repeating just one thing over and over. "Listen, I have only one request. When I die, burn my body in the cremation ground." Hearing this repeatedly, my younger uncle discussed with Kader about bringing a religious cleric, Hujur, to the house. Kader agreed, and the next afternoon, they brought the imam from the local market mosque. The imam tried spiritual healing and attempted to understand the situation, but even he could not make sense of what was happening. The imam simply said, "Who would do such a thing to a devout and honest man like him? And who would want to harm him in the final stages of his life?" After saying a few more words, the imam left. That night, something strange happened in the house. Suddenly, in the middle of the night, loud thudding noises began hitting the tin roof. Everyone came out of their rooms, watching in confusion as stones kept pelting the roof relentlessly. From that moment, the family realized something supernatural was taking place. They all stayed together in one room for the rest of the night. At dawn, after the Fajr prayer, the two uncles went to meet the imam again and described everything in detail, asking him to refer a more knowledgeable spiritual healer. The imam directed them to a respected Hujur in a nearby area. The uncles gathered the information and went to meet him. Luckily, they found him and explained everything. The Hujur agreed to come and stay at their home for one night to observe the situation. That very evening, he arrived with the uncles. Around midnight, while everyone was sitting and talking with him inside the house, a storm-like chaos suddenly broke out around the building. It felt like a whirlwind that could destroy everything in moments. The Hujur immediately stepped outside and instructed everyone to stay inside, locking all doors and windows. After nearly an hour, the storm finally stopped, and the Hujur returned, visibly exhausted. Uncle Kader helped him inside and sat him down. What he said next left everyone breathless. "Your father has been the target of extremely powerful black magic, far more intense than I expected, something I could never imagine one human would inflict on another out of sheer hatred." The entire house fell silent for a moment. My grandmother asked the Hujur who could have done this, but he said he couldn't identify the person. "You'll need to find out who has such deep hatred against him and convince that person to undo the spell," he said. "I cannot break it myself." While this conversation was happening, my younger uncle was sitting in the next room, deep in thought about everything. Suddenly, he began screaming. When everyone rushed in, they found him collapsed on the floor, bleeding from his left ear. After they helped him onto the bed and asked what happened, he said, "I was sitting and thinking about Father when I felt a dark, blurry figure pass through the wall and charge toward me. As I stood up, it slapped me so hard I was thrown to the ground." After hearing what the younger uncle had experienced, the Hujur stunned everyone by revealing some chilling and mysterious facts. Details so disturbing that they would shake anyone to their core. However, those revelations will be shared at the end of the story. Before leaving, the Hujur advised the family to complete a full recitation, khatam, of the Quran in the house, as it would help in revealing the identity of the one who performed the black magic. The very next morning, following the Hujur's instruction, both uncles invited madrasa students to the house to complete the Quran recitation and arranged food for them. Meanwhile, the elder uncle asked the Hujur to refer them to an even more experienced spiritual healer, assuring him that he was willing to cover any cost. Right after the Quran recitation was completed, the Hujur returned with his spiritual teacher. Upon hearing the entire story and being asked to reveal the name of the sorcerer, the senior hujur requested some time and made one thing very clear. There are two jinns residing in this house, one Hindu and one Muslim. Both are extremely powerful and have always been seeking ways to harm your family. Until I return, be very careful. After that day, the disturbances began increasing. Unusual things started happening. Stones hitting the roof at odd hours, items being scattered around the house, sounds of anklets, sudden outbreaks of fire in random places, and even sightings of terrifying venomous snakes around the property. Meanwhile, my grandfather's health declined to its worst state, and he seemed to be awaiting his final moments, constantly repeating the same request. When I die, take me to that cremation ground and burn me. But then he began saying more strange things. It keeps telling me to go to the cremation ground. Take me there. Leave me there. If you don't, one day it will take me away itself. And if it does, it will take me with immense pain. Only if you take me, I might be saved. Everyone was shocked and confused. What was he trying to say? Why was he saying it repeatedly? No one could understand. 2 days passed like this. Later, the senior hujur sent a message through his assistant, revealing that the Hindu jinn had been sent through black magic specifically to target my grandfather, while the Muslim jinn had been sent to harm the rest of the family. Upon receiving this terrifying information, the entire family became deeply worried. How would this end? Who would want to inflict such devastating harm on them? Despite endless thinking and searching, they found no answers. Then, just a few days later, a heartbreaking tragedy struck our family when the senior hujur himself returned and revealed to our uncles the name of the person who had performed the black magic. But I'll leave the name of that person and why the entire family became the target of black magic as a twist for the end of the story. It was someone no one in the family could have ever imagined. With the hujur's help, the family reached out to a renowned Islamic scholar who reportedly said, if you don't want the whole family to suffer, let your father go with them. Otherwise, disaster will fall upon everyone. He added that the black magic inflicted on their father was so horrific that there was no way to undo it. But how could that be possible? Can anyone ever be prepared to watch a family member die before their eyes? Never. That's why the entire family risked everything to save my grandfather. After gathering all this terrifying information, my grandfather's health began to decline again, and he kept repeating, if they take me, they will kill me with unbearable pain. So take me to the cremation ground yourselves. One afternoon, Uncle Cotter set out for his father's second wife's house, his stepmother, to inform them of his father's condition and invited them to come and visit him. 3 members of that family came and were heartbroken upon seeing my grandfather's state, deeply regretting that they hadn't contacted him all those years. But what use was regret at that point? From then on, both families began living together again, though villagers talked as was expected. In the midst of all this, Uncle Cotter risked his own life to do something extraordinary to protect the whole family. But as I said, the twist will come at the end. Please forgive me, just wait a little longer, and inshallah, you won't be disappointed. Then came the most horrific day of all. The hujur had warned everyone to keep a close eye on my grandfather. For 3 months after discovering signs of black magic, they never left him unattended. But one afternoon after the Asr prayer, everyone was busy with household chores. Grandmother went into the bedroom for something and let out a scream before collapsing unconscious. When the family rushed in, the scene they encountered was beyond words. My grandfather lay lifeless on the bed, without a head. A pool of fresh blood flooded the bed and the floor. I don't need to describe any further. You can imagine it. May Allah forgive us, but if something like this ever happened to someone in your own family, could you even begin to describe what that moment would feel like? I couldn't either. Everyone stood there, stunned and speechless, unable to process what had just happened. Uncle Cotter, and Uncle Rafiq, holding back their pain and emotions, tried to piece together all the events and understand what had truly happened. Then suddenly, they realized something even more horrifying. The severed head was nowhere to be found inside the room, despite searching every corner they couldn't locate it. In desperation, they began praying to Allah for guidance. That's when a thought struck them. Ever since falling ill, their father repeatedly said, "When I die, take me to the cremation ground and burn me." Following that clue, the younger uncle, Rabiul uncle, and the step-uncle all assumed that if this was the work of a jinn, then perhaps it had taken him to the cremation ground. Without wasting another moment, the three of them ran toward the cremation site. And from there, the unimaginable began to unfold. Remember how the story opened? With cries of agony from the riverside cremation ground and a blazing round object atop the pyre? Yes, listeners, that round object was none other than my grandfather's severed head. The younger uncle began screaming, "Abba, Abba," while desperately removing the burning wood from the pyre. Rabiul uncle fetched water from the river to extinguish the fire, and once the flames were out, the eldest uncle carefully wrapped their father's head in his shirt and began the heart-wrenching journey home. I still remember him saying how it felt like his chest would explode with grief, as if his father was whispering into his ear, "Kader, don't be sad, my son. Take care of your mother in my absence and protect the whole family." But even in daylight, as they were returning from the cremation ground, all three of them turned their gaze toward the shimul tree and saw a fiery, human-like shadow staring at them with a wicked grin. After reaching home, the hujur was immediately informed, and the funeral preparations began. Ritual washing, prayers, and arrangements for burial. But just then, the hujur warned, "Mr. Kader, your danger isn't over. Though they've taken your father's life, their goal is still incomplete. They want his entire body, so don't bury him outside. Bury him inside the house." He further instructed that the grave must be watched carefully and constantly. Following the hujur's guidance, my grandfather was buried inside the house. After the burial, the hujur instructed the family to keep a candle burning at all times near the grave. Otherwise, a catastrophe could still happen. Since then, a candle was always lit beside his grave, and someone from the family always kept watch, especially his second wife, who sat beside it day and night. This tragic event sent shockwaves through the entire village. After learning what happened, villagers stopped visiting our uncle's house altogether. By evening, people avoided even passing by it. Several months passed, but what happened next? Did the effects of the black magic gradually fade, or did they give rise to something even more terrifying? I'll let you ponder that for a moment as we move toward the ultimate twist of the story. At this point, you all must be wondering the same three things. Who did this black magic? Why? And how? You might recall that when my younger uncle was attacked by that shadowy figure and fell ill, the hujur had shared some bone-chilling details that could make anyone's soul tremble. Those details were about how this entire black magic was performed on my grandfather and our family. On the night when the storm-like winds engulfed the house and the hujur had told everyone to stay inside while he stepped out alone, he conducted spiritual practices that revealed who was behind this and how they did it. When he returned, he said 2 extremely powerful jinns had been sent into our home, far stronger than him. One, a Hindu jinn, was sent to harm Qasim Saheb, my grandfather, and the other, a Muslim jinn, was sent to destroy our whole family. A black magician had used horrifying methods, combining the rope used in the suicide of a young man, his burial shroud, and personal items of my grandfather to create a cursed amulet, which was then placed inside the deceased shroud and buried with him. That's how the Muslim jinn was bound to us. On the other hand, black magic involving a deceased Hindu child's body was also performed, cutting hair, flesh, and cloth from the corpse and embedding a cursed talisman inside the child before cremation. However, there's a strange contradiction here. We know that the 4 sacred elements, earth, water, air, and fire, render black magic ineffective when something is burned. So how the magic remained effective even after the child's cremation is unknown. Perhaps a three-way spiritual manipulation was involved. The Hujur confessed he had never before seen such an evil method of black magic, which explained why the jinns were so incredibly strong. Then the question arises, what sin had my grandfather committed to deserve such a dreadful fate? Who could hate him enough to resort to this? Remember, the senior Hujur had once come to our home and revealed the name of the black magician to Uncle Kader, along with the reason behind the attack on our entire family. As I said at the beginning of this story, what are wealth, money, and property in the life of a human bound in the illusion of this world? Perhaps that's the only answer. Perhaps for some people this is the truth. Otherwise, how can a person so mercilessly endanger someone's life out of greed for property? I truly do not know. Can you guess who the black magician really was? Yes, it was none other than Qasim Sahib's second wife. Shocking but true. But even after the division of land and assets, things seemed fine between the families. So, what caused such a drastic change? Let me explain. After hearing the black magician's name from the elder Hujur, Uncle Kader could hardly believe his ears. To expect such treachery from someone so close was unthinkable. His family had never had any disputes or arguments with her side, so what grudge or resentment could have driven them to this? That was what my uncle kept questioning. After gathering all the information from the Hujur, my grandfather's condition worsened further, prompting Uncle Kader to immediately set out to meet his stepmother. I hadn't mentioned the conversation between them earlier, preserving it as a twist. But now, let's dive into that. When Uncle Kader met his stepmother, stepbrothers, and stepsisters, he respectfully began speaking. At one point, for the first time, he called his stepmother Ma and asked, "Ma, I don't know what my father or our family did to deserve such anger or resentment from you. But as a mother of this world, how could you do something so vile? If you had asked me just once, I would have brought everything to your feet within my capacity. Why did you do this? What crime did my father commit? How could you commit such a heinous act like black magic and abandon your faith so easily?" Despite the sorrow in his voice, she kept dodging the matter, refusing to admit to anything. Eventually, after much insistence, Uncle Kader persuaded them to visit the house and see his father. Even then, no one in our household knew who was behind the black magic. When the three of them finally entered the house and went into Qasim's room, they were stunned by his condition. Overwhelmed with guilt and sorrow, Qasim's second wife collapsed on the floor, crying out for Allah's forgiveness. At that very moment, the elder Hujur entered the room with a copy of the Quran in his hands. It was all part of his plan to bring the second family face to face with the consequences of their actions. What the elder Hujur had already explained to Uncle Kader, he then directly confronted her and asked why she had committed such a grave crime. But at that moment, she still refused to admit anything. Everyone present in the house looked at them in shock, unable to imagine such a thing. Then the Hujur brought out the Quran they held, made her touch it, and swore her to tell the truth. With no other choice, Qasim's second wife confessed in front of everyone that yes, she was the one responsible for his condition. In her anger and frustration, she said she had not realized how vile her actions were, but that she had done it. When the Hujur asked through whom she had done it, she explained that although the land and property had been divided equally, at the last moment they were denied any share of the market land, which was substantial. She questioned why they were deprived, and whether it was simply because they were the second family. Hearing this, Uncle Kader pleaded with his stepmother, begging her to forgive his father and remove the effects of the black magic, saying his father was suffering terribly and promising to give her whatever she needed, even selling the house to settle elsewhere, if only she would save his father. Moved by his words, she broke down crying. But after composing herself, she named a tantric from Sylhet who she had contacted and paid a large sum to carry out the black magic. She admitted that now she understood how great a wrong she had done and expressed her desire to repent by going to the tantric to remove the black magic from her husband. Following this, Uncle Kader, his stepmother, and step-siblings went to the tantric's place. After receiving permission from the tantric's disciples, they entered the room where the tantric, laughing wickedly, looked at the stepmother and said, "You're here? Your work is almost done. In just a few days, you'll see your heart's desire fulfilled." Hearing this, the stepmother cried and begged him to stop everything. He did not want the effects of this magic to harm anyone else. He realized his mistake and had come to atone for it. But Uncle Kader's stepmother's pleas were ignored by the tantric, who coldly said, "This is impossible now. I warned you to think carefully before acting. No matter how much you beg now, it's useless. The one I sent will never stop until his own goals are fulfilled. No one can stop him." Despite this, realizing her mistake in caring for her husband and family, Uncle Kader's stepmother begged the tantric to lift the black magic. Eventually, the tantric softened and revealed a way to remove the black magic from the whole family, though the magic affecting Kasim could not be undone. The only way was to retrieve the talisman placed inside the grave of the young man who had committed suicide and been buried with that cursed talisman. This would require a very brave person. While the tantric's disciple would accompany the person to guide, the actual work had to be done by that person alone. Hearing this, Uncle Kader bravely volunteered to risk his life for his family and undertake the task. According to the tantric's calculations, the retrieval had to happen on the full moon night, 3 days later. On that night, the tantric summoned Uncle Kader to his place, introduced him to his disciple, and told them to wait for the right time. At midnight, under the moonlight that clearly lit the village road, Uncle Kader and his companion went to a graveyard on the edge of a nearby village's wetland. Upon arrival, the companion signaled a specific grave. Uncle Kader moved forward and saw a newly made grave. But according to the stepmother and tantric, the black magic had been placed 3 months earlier, so why was the grave so fresh? Uncle Kader suspected they had come to the wrong grave, but when he asked his companion, he only nodded and pointed to the grave. Uncle Kader began digging with a hoe, but immediately after the first strike, the graveyard shook like an earthquake, and hundreds of voices cried out, "Help!" from all around. Ignoring this, Uncle Kader continued digging until his final strike hit a bamboo mat covering the grave. Suddenly, hundreds of crows appeared, cawing loudly, gathering at the graveyard. Uncle Kader saw that alongside the strange noises, hundreds of crows had surrounded the two of them. Yet he did not stop his work. After clearing the soil from the grave and removing the bamboo mats, a foul smell began to rise. Under the full moonlight, they saw a decomposed corpse inside a blood-stained shroud, emitting a putrid odor. Ignoring everything, Uncle Kader descended into the grave, plunged his hand into the rotten body, and found the bundle of talismans. Everything went smoothly until he tried to come out with the talisman. As he raised one hand to signal for help, he suddenly felt something strong and sharp grip his leg. In his haste, he couldn't free himself from the grave, and his companion was unable to pull him out. When his hand was placed beneath him on his leg, he clearly saw in the moonlight a blood-stained hand emerging from the shroud, clutching him tightly. Terrified, Uncle Kader screamed loudly, asking his companion for help, but the corpse seemed to pull him deeper into the grave. Eventually, invoking Allah's name and summoning all his strength, he managed to free himself from the grave. However, as he hurriedly covered the grave with soil, he noticed that the flesh below his knee was torn and bleeding heavily. Gathering himself, he prayed to Allah, confessing his sins and asking for forgiveness, hoping this was a solution, even if he wasn't sure. Then he and his companion went to the tantric's place, where his companion wrapped a cloth around Uncle Cater's bleeding leg to stop the blood. On their way back, Uncle Cater saw thousands of dark figures trying to follow, but were stopped by some invisible force. At the tantric's place, the talisman was unwrapped, revealing a piece of a shirt, which Uncle Cater was instructed to throw into a pond on his way home. In this way, risking his life, Uncle Cater saved his entire family that night. By Allah's mercy, he managed to save the others, but could not save his father's life, a loss that still brings regret. What do you think? Is the story over here? Would you like to know what happened about a month after Nana's burial? Did the effects of the black magic really disappear after Nana's death? Now let's move to the final twist of the story. On July 21st, 2008, during the rainy season, on a day soaked with rain, Nana's second wife was sitting beside his grave, reciting the Quran. As per the senior Hazur's instructions, a candle was always kept burning by the grave, and that day was no different. Suddenly, a gust of wind blew out the candle. She noticed this during a verse and paused her recitation. Putting the Quran aside, she reached for the matchbox to relight the candle, only to find it empty. Without wasting time, she hurried to the kitchen to fetch a new matchbox. But when she returned, the scene awaiting her was beyond imagination. The entire grave appeared to have been violently smashed in anger. Such destruction could not have happened within moments. She screamed, fell to the ground, and fainted. Hearing her cries, the whole family rushed in, and seeing the devastation, they were stunned into silence. Uncle Cater ran to the grave, removed the broken concrete pieces, and searched for his father, but the grave was empty. Little Uncle was abroad at the time, so Big Uncle, unable to make sense of the situation, took Robiul with him and went back to the cremation ground to search for the body, but it was nowhere to be found. Disheartened, Uncle Cater fell ill after returning home. The family contacted the senior Huzur, who investigated and revealed that, even after Qasim Sahab's death, the black magic's effect had not completely lifted. The main intent of the Hindu jinn was to take Qasim Sahab alive and burn him, which had failed. After his death, various efforts had been made to imprison the jinn, but it had only grown more enraged. Taking advantage of the candle being extinguished and the family's absence by the grave, the jinn had broken the grave, taken the body, and carried it far away to cremate it secretly so no one could find it. The senior Huzur assured them that from that day onward, all their troubles had ended and the jinn would never return to harm them again. Dear listeners, this was today's story. Thank you all for listening till the end. If you liked the story, please give it a like and share it with your friends. For more such chilling stories, subscribe to our channel.